Okay, so let's make some adjustments here so our rendering will be a little bit cleaner. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go to Render Settings, which is right here. It's the third blue ball over. And it's going to open up our Options dialog box, and it's going to take us directly to the Rhino render options here. So what we're going to do is, first and foremost, is we're going to change our, let's set it up as a transparent background. So instead of getting that gray that we were getting in our rendering, now we should have no background. It should just render the image, and that's it. You do have the option of rendering with your curves on, and I'll show you what that looks like. And you can also do your render surface edges, and don't click these yet. I just want to show you real quick what it produces instead. It didn't show them. Why didn't it show them? There they are. So it'll include your line work. Personally, it doesn't look that good, and it also didn't deal with the clipping mask appropriately. And so that's why we did a Make 2D, right? So we did a Make 2D, and we're going to actually superimpose this behind that Make 2D instead of including that information in. So that's what happens when you turn on your curves. So I'm going to go back to my settings. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to render curves off and render surface edge ISO curves off. So one thing that we did keep was a transparent background, and we'll check to make sure that that's the result we want. And so the next step is to see what your resolution is at. And right now we have it at 640 by 480. And just know that that's pretty small. And that's why it rendered in about 13 seconds, right? If you bump this up to, let's say, 2000 by 15, your rendering could take upwards of 15 minutes. The size of your rendering will be a lot larger. So let's say, for instance, the 480 was this size. The 2000 is going to be a rendering this big. And so that's why it's going to take a lot longer, because it's producing a larger image for you. So depending on how big your rendering needs to be for your board, that's how large you should do your resolution. And also, depending on how much time you have, that's how you should also choose your resolution. Typically, when you're setting up your rendering, keep it at a low resolution, so that way it shoots that rendering out right away for you, and you can see sort of what it's giving you. And then once you have all your parameters set, then you can up your resolution, hit render, walk away from it, which we're going to do, and then we'll see the difference. Pretty much the major difference in that is you're going to get a larger image. So that way you have more pixels inside your image. So I think 2000 is a little too big, so I'm going to just do 1600 by 1200. Now just below that we have our DPI, and DPI deals with how it's viewed. There's multiple ways something is viewed, right? You could either view it on a screen, you can either view it printed, or let's see, or I think there's one other way. Essentially, 72 DPI is good for looking at a screen. 150 DPI is good for printing. 300 DPI is going to give you the most crisp image possible, but it's also going to exponentially add time to your rendering. So if you up the size of your resolution and up the size of your DPI, it's going to take a lot longer to render something. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change it to 150, because that's really all you need. And then we also have this Anti-Aliasing. Right now it's set at normal. If you put it at none, your rendering will come out faster. If you put it at high, the rendering is going to take longer. What that does is when it's doing the rendering, it's trying to figure out the rendering for you, and it's taking more time to go through it and do it for you. It'll give you a cleaner render. So it's at normal right now. I'm going to leave it at normal because I don't want this rendering to take forever. And so I'm going to leave it at normal. You can add a background image in. For instance, if you wanted to add a sky or some kind of JPEG or PNG file that you have, you could superimpose that in the background. You could also take, let's say if you took a photograph of the site and you have your 3D model, you could do that. You could superpose it in the background. Typically, it's easier to just do that in Photoshop or in Illustrator rather than doing it here. That's just preference. And so we kind of touched on everything else right here. And so I'm just going to hit. We do not need to deal with this. No. Okay, so that's all we needed to change. And essentially what it was is, I don't know why these are on. Essentially what it was is creating a transparent background and adjusting our resolution, our DPI. And if you want, you can also change your anti-aliasing, but I'm just going to leave it what it is. So I'm going to hit OK. Nothing's going to change on the screen. It's all going to happen in the actual rendering itself. So now if I hit render, you'll notice the rendering also comes out as a lot larger of an image, and that's because it is a lot larger of an image. And so if I open it up like this, you'll see it's taking about 1 minute and 30 seconds instead of 13 seconds, right? And so I'll let it do its thing for that minute. Now there isn't a crazy difference in results, but the major thing is it's a lot larger of a rendering. So before we rendered something maybe this size, actually, to be honest with you, it was probably about this size. It was really small. This one's probably going to be about this size.
Mine is taking like 5 minutes.
5 minutes? So I don't know why mine's moving faster, but it is. So 3, 2, 1, and it's done, almost. So if you zoom in on this rendering once it finishes here, you can zoom in on it. You can still see that there is some pixels going on, but it's a lot clearer of an image. And this still acts exactly the same. So there's setting off another rendering. What we did is just adjusted the image size. We also adjusted its DPI, and we created a transparent background. So when I save this, and you don't have to do this, this is just to check something here. I'm just going to call it test, and I am going to open that test. I will actually check this on the break instead. So one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to X out of this rendering. I'm going to go back to my rendering settings, and since everybody's going to take a break, let's make a lot larger of an image here. Let's go to 2000, and let's jump up our anti-aliasing to high. We'll keep the DPI at 150 because that's really all you need. After that, it's just overkill. Don't worry about saving it. I just X'd out of it. You can always re-render it. It took like, what, 5 minutes tops? And so now that I made those changes, I'm going to hit render again. And let's see how long this one's going to take. If it's going to take longer than our break, then it should not do it. Yeah, so it says 19 minutes. And now it's jumping up to 23, 26. 14, it's jumping around everywhere.
It was 2000 something?
Yeah, you'll see it down here at the bottom. It says 2000 by 1536. So it says it's about 15 minutes, so I'm going to let that run while we take a break.